Everyone sees the laugh, the confident stride, the camera that finds her like a spotlight made for celebration. Sofía Vergara walks into a room and the room smiles back. She has become the living shorthand for glamour, for comedic heat, for an impossible, effortless charisma. But while the world has learned to read her as an icon of success, the image that made her bankable was also the shield she built to survive a childhood threaded with fear and instability. The woman who can sell 1 million laughs on a sitcom is the same woman who learned as a child that silence could be a life-saving shape. We open on a montage of applause and red carpets, flashbulbs, designer gowns, a practiced laugh, then cut to a grainy family photograph and the hush that follows. There were nights of whispered arguments behind closed doors, a household shadowed by substance and violence, moments when a young Sofía had to negotiate safety inside a family that was itself fractured. At the center of this private chaos were secrets that would not remain private. Addiction passed through generations, a brutal act that took a life, and the pattern of loss that demanded adaptation rather than explanation. This is not a story that traffics in gossip. It is an investigation into the cost paid by a public figure whose image was forged in private pain. The spectacle of fame hides its ledger, yet the ledger exists, and that is heavy. We will ask how a woman who made a career of being adored survived the unspoken bargains that fame demanded of her and of so many like her. But the truth behind it is much darker.
Before the laughter, before the lights of Los Angeles, there was Barranquilla, a port city, burning with color, sound, and contradiction. Sofía Margarita Vergara grew up in a home that looked picture-perfect from the outside, a big, close-knit Colombian family, dinners full of noise and warmth. But inside those walls there were cracks no one dared to speak of. Her father, Julio, was a cattle rancher, charming, successful, and also a man haunted by his own demons. Alcohol flowed easily in that house. The family's business ties placed them close to the dangerous edges of Colombia's underworld, a time when drug trafficking and corruption soaked into everyday life. Sofía learned early what it meant to live in a place where laughter had to be louder than the chaos outside. There were nights she would cover her ears when shouting filled the house, and mornings she'd see her parents pretend nothing happened. Like many children of broken spaces, she became the peacekeeper, the one who smiled to make everyone else forget. Her nickname at school was La Toti, the cheerful girl who made people laugh. No one knew that her laughter was a kind of armor, a way to survive. "If you can make people smile," she once said in an old interview, "they never ask what's wrong with you." That was the first mask Sofía learned to wear, not for fame, but for safety. But safety, in Colombia during the late 80s and 90s, was never permanent. Violence was always close. One of her brothers struggled with addiction, a reflection of a country where cocaine wasn't just an export, but a tragedy that touched almost every home. And one night, that chaos finally crossed the threshold of the Vergara family.
When Sofía Vergara first appeared on television, Colombia stopped to watch. She was radiant, tall, golden-skinned, a smile that could command any camera. At 19, she was discovered by a photographer while walking on a beach. That moment would become the clean, polished origin story that every magazine later repeated. But behind that story was something else. A quiet desperation to leave behind the ghosts of her home. Hollywood would later call her the Latin bombshell, but Sofía's first steps into fame were not about beauty, they were about survival. Modeling, then television hosting, were ways out of a life surrounded by danger. The girl who once made her family laugh now learned to make a country fall in love with her. When she moved to the United States, she entered a world that promised glamour and safety, but it came with a different kind of prison. In Hollywood, Sofía's accent became her brand, her smile became her product, and her identity, carefully curated, controlled, monetized, became something she could never fully escape. She played Gloria Delgado Pritchett in Modern Family, the loud, funny, passionate Latina wife who stole every scene. Critics called her a breakthrough,
The public adored her. But the same stereotype that made her famous also locked her into an image. The beautiful, fiery woman, always laughing, always strong. No one asked what it cost her to stay that way. Behind the scenes, she was carrying the weight of her family's past. Her younger brother, Rafael, was lost to addiction and violence, killed on the streets of Bogota. Another brother, Julio, battled his own demons, drifting through Los Angeles in a haze of drugs and regret. Sofía paid for rehab, arranged interventions, stayed silent through it all. Because in Hollywood, silence is professionalism. Emotion is weakness. "I've lived through things that people wouldn't believe," she told one interviewer quietly. "But I learned, you don't show it, you just keep going." Every laugh track on Modern Family, every red carpet appearance, every flawless smile became a performance inside a performance. The world saw perfection, but inside, Sofía was still that little girl from Barranquilla, holding chaos together with a grin.
It was 1998. Sofía Vergara had just begun to taste what the world calls success: commercials, fame, money, a future that finally seemed brighter than the streets she'd left behind in Colombia. Then came the phone call that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Her younger brother, Rafael Vergara, had been shot, killed in what was described as a kidnapping gone wrong. The details were messy, the explanations thinner than smoke. In Colombia, those kinds of deaths never came with justice, only silence. Sofía flew home immediately. The camera stayed in Los Angeles, but the weight of that loss never left her. In a rare interview years later, her voice trembled when she mentioned it, the kind of tremble you hear in someone who's learned to live with ghosts. "It was a nightmare," she said. "I don't think you ever recover." Her brother's death shattered her family. Her mother fell into depression. Her father turned deeper to alcohol. And Sofía, the daughter who had become the pride of the family, suddenly carried an invisible duty: to keep them together, to keep earning, to keep smiling. She did what she always did best. She put on the mask. She smiled, she worked. But every laugh in front of the camera came from a heart heavy with loss. The sound of applause became an echo she couldn't trust. And when people told her she was so lucky, Sofía learned to nod, even when luck felt like the cruelest word. Her brother's death wasn't the only tragedy. Another brother, Julio, spiraled into addiction after Rafael's murder. Sofía tried to help him, paid for his rehab, brought him to the U.S., hoped Hollywood's light might burn away the darkness. But it didn't. Julio was arrested multiple times in Los Angeles. Once again, the tabloids circled. And Sofía stayed silent. In a world built on image, silence is often the only protection you have. But silence also eats at you. It turns pain into pressure. And that pressure, one day, has to break.
In Hollywood, silence isn't just survival. It's a contract. It's written between smiles, hidden between the lines of every endorsement, every interview, every script. And Sofía Vergara learned to sign it without a pen. After the death of her brother, the industry didn't want her grief. It wanted her energy. Producers told her, "You're the sunshine. You're the funny one. Don't change." Publicists reminded her that people didn't pay to see sadness. They paid to laugh. So she laughed. Louder. She played the role they needed her to play, the woman who made pain look like passion. Behind that laughter was a woman who had become fluent in suppression. Every tragedy was another clause in the unspoken contract. Don't show it. Don't break down. Don't make the world uncomfortable with your truth. When her brother Julio was arrested, headlines began to resurface the family's dark past: drugs, violence, loss. But no reporter asked how it felt. Instead, they asked her to pose, to smile, to sell another episode. She did what every survivor of fame learns. She built her silence into armor. In the industry, it's called professionalism. In reality, it's a kind of exile, a place where your pain must never touch your performance. There are whispers in Hollywood about fixers, those who clean reputations, bury scandals, rewrite public memory. But sometimes the best fixer is the star herself, erasing her own truth, editing her story until it looks marketable. That was Sofia's quiet genius and her quiet tragedy. Her laughter became currency, her accent a brand, her silence a signature. People think success heals you, a voice might say over the imagery of flashing cameras, but sometimes success just teaches you how to hide better.
The years have passed. The laughter remains. Sofía Vergara still steps onto stages bathed in gold, still flashes the same bright, cinematic smile that built an empire. But if you look closely, if you listen in the quiet between the applause, you can feel the weight of everything she's learned to carry. She has turned pain into discipline, loss into focus. She built a career that no tragedy could take away. Every brand deal, every role, every business she leads, they are not just symbols of wealth, but of control, because control was the one thing her childhood never allowed her. Her silence, once forced, became chosen. She no longer hides because she's afraid, she hides because she's protecting peace. Hollywood still loves its myths, the flawless woman, the eternal smile, but Sofia's truth is quieter and far more powerful. She survived chaos, she survived loss, she survived the machine. "You can't let your past define you," she once said, "but you can let it remind you who you are." Behind every camera flash is a memory she refuses to forget. The brother who never made it out, the home she lost, the little girl who learned that laughter could keep the world from falling apart. And so she laughs still, not to hide, but to honor what she survived. In the end, Sofía Vergara didn't just become a Hollywood star. She became proof that light can be self-made, even if it was born from darkness. Her smile, once a mask, is now a monument, a silent testament to a woman who turned her pain into power and her silence into strength.